So let me introduce our panel. First, we'll start. Oh, please don't go dead on me. I'm going to start here with our ruby red slipper gal, Jennifer O'Toole. Jennifer was diagnosed as an Aspie in adulthood and is the mother of 3 Asper kids. She's the founder of Asper Kids as well as a teacher. She's also this year's winner of the Autism Society of America's 2014 Outstanding Literary Award of the Year and has been invited to speak to the President's Council on Fitness at the White House Summit on Americans with Disabilities. Comparing the Aspie journey to an adventure in Oz, and I'm giving quotes from their keynote yesterday. There's no one to save her. She had the power to go home all along. Next to Jennifer, we have Christopher Gauthier. He's a self-advocate and a USU professor of Art and Photography. His photography can be found in permanent collections of the Mississippi Museum of Art, Webster University, the Netherlands, Kosovo Airport, and I can't even pronounce that next one, so I'm skipping it. And in private collections nationally and internationally. A portion of his project, Evidence and Artifacts, is behind me and captures not only the faces of those on the spectrum, but their support community. I hope you've all enjoyed looking at all the many faces. This collection is actually much larger than what you're seeing here. Christopher currently sits on our advisory board, and his quote that I've chosen for today is, "You define you. Breathe and be present in the moment." Next to Christopher, we have Stephen Shore. He's a self-advocate, author, and world-renowned professor at Adelphi University. As a child, it was thought Stephen was too sick to be treated as an outpatient on an outpatient basis and recommended for institutionalization. He presents and consults internationally on adult issues pertinent to education, relationships, employment, advocacy, and disclosure, as discussed. And is the author of Beyond the Wall, Personal Experiences with Autism and the Asperger Syndrome, Ask and Tell, Self-Advocacy, Disclosure for People on the Autism Spectrum, and Understanding Autism for Dummies. He also serves on our advisory board, and the quote I've chosen to remember him by today is, "They persevered, and I persevered." Next to Stephen, we have Tim Page. Tim is a Pulitzer Prize winner and a USC professor of music, communication, and journalism. He was diagnosed with Asperger syndrome at the age of 45. Among his credits are radio host and the artistic advisor and creative chair for the St. Louis Symphony Orchestra. His books include The Glenn Gould Reader, Selected Letters of Virgil Thompson, Tim Page on Music, and Parallel Play, an autobiographical account of growing up with undiagnosed Asperger's. Tim also serves on our advisory board, and the quote I've chosen is, "I'm very grateful to have the diagnosis of Asperger's syndrome because it explains a lot." Next to Tim, we have Benjamin, and Benjamin, I'm really sorry, I've already forgotten how to say this. Tarasevich. Thank you. Benjamin is a self-advocate, public speaker, actor, and musician. He's inspired those around him in Colorado with his presentation of Living with Autism, Breaking Through Barriers. He's been featured in various news articles and on TV. His message is one of hope and perseverance, and he inspires people in all walks of life to meet the challenges in their own lives. His quote that I've chosen is, "I love to make people laugh." Our next panelist, actually, would you like to do this?
Our next panelist is actually sitting in the audience because he didn't want to be on the stage. His name is Samir Dahar. He's a young man that I have had the pleasure of working with for a number of years. He's essentially nonverbal, so he's actually keyboarding to us. He was able to use a keyboard device and take a verbal IQ test and scored above 150. So really, really bright young man. When I asked him, we didn't have a bio on him, I asked him to write his own bio just now, and he said, "Marlo, say, in a world of verbal people, Samir has found his voice. Years ago, I had no way of expression. Now I make my own symphony to the world."
Do you want me to read this? Do you want me to... Okay. All right. So let's kick it off. I wanted to focus on a little bit of the strengths because we do focus a lot on the challenges, but I think it's really important that we pay attention to the strengths. So I'd like each of you to tell us a little bit about the strengths that living with a diagnosis has brought to you and how you use it in your life to perhaps meet the challenge. And Jennifer, we'll start with you.
Okay. Are we working? There we go. Great. So the first bit actually is not my own strength, but my instant response was this. Often I'll hear parents say, or teachers say, that we who are on the spectrum, we don't imagine, we can't come up with the pretend play that other kids do. Well, I suppose that's true in some ways, but imagination takes a lot of different forms, and I think it's sort of best told in this one little story. I had made a geoboard for my son, which is nothing more than a piece of wood and a bunch of nails hammered in, and he was 3. Well, I was busy making lunch, and he's playing with rubber bands and making different shapes. And he holds it up and he says, "Mommy, look what I made! Look what I made!" And I'm seeing 2 triangles with the points touching. And I said, "Oh, that's super great! Yay, Gavin!" And he said, "Yeah, what is it?" Oh no, anyone who's ever had Art come home from school knows that moment. It's a butterfly. No, okay. It's a bow tie. No. I got really stupid really fast, apparently. So, because, no. Mom, it's a shout. What? It was from one point, 2 triangles emanating. In other words, the way sound travels. Yeah, for him, clap for him, because I didn't get that until he told me. But the point is, that imagination, creativity, strengths, yeah, they look different. And that's a good thing, because anybody who owns an eye, anything, or a car, or ever had an X-ray, should be grateful for different kinds of imagination and creativity. What's the benefit or the greatest blessing and strength that I've gotten from diagnosis? Well, simply, Aristotle, I believe it was, says, knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom. When you know that you don't have to be all things to all people, you can stop trying so dang hard. You can stop trying to be perfect, because we all know that trying to be perfect is that one goal that we can all set, that we can all be sure that we're going to fail to reach. But when you think that you're meant to do this and supposed to do that and supposed to do this, it's hard not to feel that way when you realize that essentially you're not supposed to be using the boys' bathroom and the equipment in there isn't meant to fit you because you're just fine, but you're supposed to be using the other bathroom. That's what life is like. Once you find out you're not broken any more than maybe this was supposed to be blonde or black, it came out this way, and that's just fine. And once you know who you are, then you know what you can be, and you can stop trying to be that which you're not meant to be and let someone else do it.
I'd applaud. Yeah. So I feel like this is 2 questions. One was, what are the strengths, and what was the strength once the diagnosis happened? I was in my 40s when that happened. So for me, on the diagnosis side of things, it became freedom. It became the platform of understanding myself through a lens that I never had before. It's like all of a sudden I could turn around and, wow, here's a group of people who I have a rubric to be able to measure all of my life experiences by, and I'm no longer this freak of nature. Imagine living 40 plus years believing you're wrong and you're out of sync with the rest of the world. Now, I just became a rebel. And I reveled in that weirdness and that freakness, and I amplified it, and I let it push me forward, and it became the synergy and the energy that drove me. That's part of the negative too, right? It can consume you. But it became freedom, and I followed and I pursued with deep, deep passion the things I cared about. Now, the things I didn't, which is an example of all of the kids and all of us who are on the spectrum, we really don't want to do, and we're terrible at doing them. So I just avoided them. But as far as the subject of photography goes, I know a ton, special interest, right? So that's why I love what I do. And I've spent most of my life pursuing it in every possible way. When I was in my early 20s, I had done more in my career than most of my colleagues who are in their 40s or 50s now. And I had the best time. I've worked with some of the greatest people in this field. That's not bad. You know, I get to tell some amazing stories to my students about amazing jobs and amazing people and famous people that I got to meet just because of being there. You know, I said yesterday, half of success is just showing up. That's a big part of it.
Thanks. Great. So I'm looking at it. What has been said by Chris and my little sister over here. You can either be a poor imitation of somebody else, or you can be the best you can be. Now, I was fortunate to have an early diagnosis, even way back when they weren't really doing early diagnoses, and parents who understood intuitively what my strengths were. And even at the young age of 4 years old, it was clear that I had mechanical abilities. And as I mentioned, they gave me all kinds of things to take apart and made sure I got them back together again. By the time I got to my teen years, I had a fascination with bicycles. Maybe it had to do with all the spinning parts. And I got it to a point where I could take a bicycle apart down to the ball bearings and the individual spokes and put them all back together again. Strengths. And instead of doing the usual work-study jobs in college, or the typical teenage jobs, such as being a busboy. Well, actually, I did do that and found that I failed miserably at it. I was a star bicycle mechanic. I find, and had things gone a little bit differently, had I been less academically oriented, today I probably still would have been a bicycle mechanic and just as happy as Chris is in his area of photography. I find that those of us on the spectrum, our success, one key aspect to that is being able to pin down a strength and an interest, which are one and the same. And if we can connect that strength and interest to something that society values, be it photography, be it cattle processing plants, such as with Temple Grandin, be it writing, whatever it might be, then you end up with a person who may be a regional, national, or international expert in the area. Well, as it turned out, I had another interest, and that was autism. So turning my laser beam focus on that, now here I am on faculty at a university in New York and presenting on autism in, well, so far 37 countries. There's about 166 to go. And there's 4 states left. Thank you.
Oh, are you done?
Oh, I'm all done.
Sorry.
Finished. Over.
Sorry about that. Forgive me for not clapping along. I threw out my arm and I have something called tennis elbow, which sounds so trivial and has absolutely ruined my summer because I haven't been able to type. It's good to be here. And I guess my own sense about I'm going to agree with Chris that I think there are 2 questions here. One is how you behaved, how you understood things before your diagnosis, and then there is the question of the diagnosis. I sometimes wonder whether early diagnosis would have been good for me or not. It certainly would have gotten rid of some of the bully teachers that I had. I don't think the stuff that they made people who are about my age, I'm going to be 60 in a couple months, go through. None of this stuff would be allowed in pretty much any school these days. I mean, there was a sense with me that they couldn't figure out why I could remember all the presidents and their wives and give you the dates and all that sort of stuff. and I couldn't possibly pass a really, kid-oriented third grade science class. But for me, there were just certain things that really interested me, and the vast majority of the world did not. I mean, I think my first hero was Ferdinand the Bull, and I think he's probably still my hero. If you don't know that book, it's by Munro Leaf, and it's wonderful. I guess my first recognition that there was really extraordinary beauty in the world was my mom let me ruin her record collection when I was about 2 or 3, and that was back for those of us of a certain age where you had 78s, 45s, and 33s. You had records that ran at 3 different speeds, and so I, of course, loved speeding up the 33s and making them go real fast, and taking the 78s and playing them slow, and it was fun. I now look at that as a sort of primeval self-medication, because I would come in from outside from this world which struck me as really frightening and difficult, and I would just put on a record, and and I think they also taught me about feelings. I would listen to one track on a recording, and that would teach me about tenderness in some strange way that was hard for me to get for a while. And so I did a lot of that, and I got interested in a number of different things. I was not diagnosed till I was 45, when I'd actually gone to St. Louis and made a colossal failure of myself trying to be an administrator. And I love the St. Louis Symphony, and I loved St. Louis in many ways. But for somebody like me who's just used to saying what he thinks, and dealing with 100 musicians, all of whom have their own ideas about things, was not very good for me. And so I'd always had the sense that I was a sort of messed up kid, but I'd learned how to survive. What I really didn't understand was I just learned how to find protective coloring. And I was able to just sort of fit in and do the things that I was good at, which were writing for a newspaper and, talking like that. But I thought I totally cured myself. And so here I am at 45 in a place that I'm having all the same aggressions and anxieties that I had when I was a kid, because I'm pretty much face blind to begin with, and dealing with all these things that were going on was just very tough for me. So I melted down. Fortunately, I was able to come back to the same newspaper I left, the Washington Post, and I was there for another 8 years. And then I was asked to be a professor, and that's perfect for me. I swear our universities are filled with autistic people, I mean, we're just interested in what we're interested in, and we'll talk about that. So in any event, it's really...
I don't want you to give it all away, because I've got other questions, but finish the thought.
Okay, yeah, all right, well, let me finish your thought. So I'm sorry about that. I had no idea what that was. Anyway, that's enough for now, but, there we are.
Okay. Remember to hold the mic up, guys, when you talk so that everyone can hear you. Benjamin? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Go ahead. How did you want to answer the question? What strengths are there in autism for you?
Well, my strengths are music, and acting, and of course public speaking, and telling jokes and talking in spoonerisms, and yeah.
It doesn't have to be a long answer.
Yeah, and I've even made up my own jokes at times.
That's
yeah, shall I
great.
tell you one? Yeah, this is actually a music joke. What is the quickest way to make a bagpipe sound way out of tune? Change the G to a D and you have a bad pipe.
Thanks, Benjamin. Okay, I want to read the response from Samir. His response to strengths that he has as a result of autism. Our strengths are sensory processing. We can specifically see discrete patterns neurotypicals can't see. This helps me understand physics. We have a question. I just want to read it really quick because it looks good. Thank you. Okay. So this comes from our audience. Did any teachers find a way to use your strengths and areas of interest to help you develop your academic skills? If so, how did that happen for you? Any one of you can start that one. We'll just throw it up to all of you. Go ahead, Stephen.
Well, I'm thinking about my musical strength combined with my graphical strengths. In undergraduate school, one thing that fascinated me was analyzing music. And those of you who are musicians, perhaps who have studied music, I developed this graphical system that was a little bit like Shankar analysis. So I could look at an entire piece. I could graph out an entire piece from its large form right down to the individual harmonies, all on one page, and then I could see it all at once. And the professors there weren't quite sure what to do with it, but it certainly helped me understand music to a greater degree.
I would say that my primary education, K through 12, was terrible. No hope. So it didn't work for me until college when I went to Southern Illinois University. And three of my professors, 3 men, took me under their wing. I refer to them as the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. They're wacky guys. Charles Swedland, who is one of the most famous professors in art and photography education, mentored me very, very dearly and very closely. David Gilmore and Dan Overturf also mentored me, and they believed in me in ways that no one else had ever believed in me before. And still to this day, those 3 guys really constantly are saying, you are incredible, you do some of the most amazing work out there, and we really believe in what you do. But that didn't happen until I got to my field of special interest. My graduating class of 1,200 people, I was the lower 12%, right? And I'm clearly not a dumb person, but education just didn't work, and the teachers just would never give me the time of day.
So for me, academics were always something I loved. You've probably heard the phrase, twice exceptional. Well, that was definitely not, and yet another phrase that was not used back in the day. I could have stayed in school if it just meant the learning parts all day. My favorite thing to do still is to learn. I was watching Jeopardy recently and introducing it to an Aspie friend who was visiting from the UK. And he shouted out the answer and he said, "Oh, I'm sorry, I don't want to appear arrogant." And I said, "Are you kidding? No. I don't know that. Could you tell me about that?" It's this constant, voracious appetite. I want to learn everything there is. So my academic experience is a lot different. Because in that arena, it looked, it was easy for me. But sometimes that actually can make you stand out in ways that, doesn't exactly endear you to every other kid on the playground. That being said, yeah, there were 3 things I think that went really right for me. One was that my elementary school teachers had the prerogative, the freedom to let me go to the library as much as I wanted to. Basically, they understood that I pretty much got what they were teaching in like one day and I was done. And rather than force me to do really boring worksheets, they let me go. And I would look at the wall and I would say, that shelf, and then that shelf, and then that shelf. And those became the eras of each grade. And I think I probably read that entire library, and it was wonderful. And it was okay. That was my escape. I think that's important. My U.S. History AP teacher, Suzanne Brofman, in high school, told us that it was completely okay for us to disagree with whatever she said as long as we could back up what we were saying. And in fact, I actually remember that there was an essay we had to write at home once, and okay, fine, I might have procrastinated a bit, and it might be the day before it was due, and I noticed that I didn't even agree with the premise of the question. And how, as an ASPE, could I write 5 pages in answer to a question that I thought was completely invalid? So I wrote an essay about why the question was invalid. And you know what she did? She gave me an A. What that says is that's a teacher who's more interested in having her students learn to be articulate, independent thinkers than in her own, quite frankly, ego. That's super, super, super important. And I think the last was, and this is a theme, please notice, this is not by accident. Every one of us, the performing arts, as major or fine arts, have been a major player in our lives. I started dancing when I was 2. I watched Swan Lake on Sesame Street, and Big Bird was telling Mr. Hooper, sorry, that the dancers were really beautiful and wonderful, and I'm sitting there watching it. My mom came in and she said, Jenny, do you like the pretty ballerinas? And I said, mm-hmm. And she said, would you like to do that? And I said, no, I can do that. And she said, oh, that's wonderful. And I said, no, I can do that. And it turned out I could do that. So Sue Silbert was my middle school teacher, middle school music teacher, and she gave me the first chance to go beyond just dance, but musical theater. And in that, then I was able to try on lots of roles and personalities and keep what I liked and let go of what I didn't. And she then also, in doing so, let the world consider me in a different way than just, the smart girl. And so to them, I will be eternally grateful.
Yeah, bravo.
Tim, hold up your mic just a little bit.
Oh, okay, sure. Can everyone hear? I love the way you mentioned Jeopardy. One of the great blessings of the introduction of computers is the fact that if you're playing Trivial Pursuit with somebody and they give the wrong answer, as they do constantly in Trivial Pursuit, now you can go to the computer and just check it real fast. Back in the 70s, I used to get in fights with friends who thought I was, trying to cheat the whole thing. Most of my teachers hated me, and I pretty much hated them. There were always 1 or 2 who really took up my cause fiercely, recognized that I was, just kind of lost and unhappy, and they'd let me stay in at recess and, just read the World Book Encyclopedia. And back then, for things I was interested in, they just immediately committed to memory. So I have some teachers, fortunately some of them are still living, who were just phenomenal to me, and I'm incredibly grateful to them. But I have been really throughout my life, despite the fact that I finally managed to get through college, I'm pretty much self-taught because curricula just don't do much for me. I want to find out what I'm interested in and, not very interested in the rest.
Did you have something to say, Benjamin? Is there a special teacher that's maybe helped you along the way?
Yes, my preschool teacher was absolutely extraordinary. She's a Waldorf teacher, and she taught me how to interact with the other children when I was socially isolated. And there's a focus on making everything artistic and beautiful, which is the way she and also my mom thinks, and that's the main focus of the Waldorf approach, where just where like what the kids would play with consisted of wooden blocks or cloths and cloth and strings and clips and play stands and logs and when your imagination comes alive and you and when you build something, you can pretend that it has all these other fancy features and I know I'm getting a little technical, but yeah, but yeah.
We can handle it, Benjamin. Go for it. Do it.
Yeah, and my elementary school is a Waldorf-based school, and my teacher, my preschool teacher. I'm getting really confused.
Do you want to come back to it in a little bit?
Well,
I can read some mirrors, and then we can come back to you.
Actually, in elementary school, I also had a Waldorf teacher, and yeah.
So Waldorf has made a huge difference because of its approach?
Uh-huh.
Okay, that's wonderful. Thanks. Samir had something to say on this one as well. He said most teachers in his experience haven't been very accepting. His mom and dad have helped him to communicate with choices at first and then with the use of the letter board. I taught myself through exploration, and now I see homeschool as the best option. So we've got some really great questions from the audience. Some of them I was going to ask you. So this is great. We're all on the same page. For our adults who maybe have a broader perspective, I'm going to break it down into kind of a two-part question. The question is, what is your biggest challenge? But I think, there's some life experience behind some of you. What was it perhaps, when you were younger, and how does that change? Because I know for my daughter, and in looking at Temple over the years, and everyone, everybody changes over the course of their lifetime. So what were some challenges maybe early on? Are they still there, or have you overcome them and there are new challenges? Anyone who wants to start it, kick it off.
And she jumps in now with a mic. Okay. Here's a line from my life. How can you be so smart and so stupid? That's it. And I'm not saying that that's something that's been overtly, explicitly said to me, but it's what resides in my own consciousness. It's very difficult if you are someone who's articulate or for whom academia is something that's easy, to not appear either apathetic or arrogant, self-centered, when what you're really being is self-referenced, to ask questions and be genuinely perplexed. Here's the thing. We're often told, and I said this yesterday in one of my sessions, that mind blindness, our inability to organically, easily see other people's perspectives. Okay, it's actually really not our biggest problem. It's kind of yours too. It's everybody's. When we assume that we know someone else's, the impetus behind what someone else does or says, we're being arrogant. We don't. None of us really knows unless we take the time to say, why are you doing that or saying that? Or why do you like that? Why don't you like that? Story just last year, I had spent the day with my mom, and I don't know, I might know a thing or two about Tudor history, and I might have been telling her the details of the entire War of the Roses, in a car drive because she asked a question about Shakespeare, and I had to tell her how that was related to Elizabethan times, but whatever. And then the next day, as a family, we were playing Monopoly. And apparently there's a strategy about buying the corner on a Monopoly board, but I can't do strategy at all. And I was offering to make what I thought was a fair trade or buy from my daughter, who at the time was 10. And my mom at first kind of jumped in and said, "Oh, Maura, my daughter, don't do that, honey. Mommy's just kidding." And no, I'm not. I thought that was a really fair deal. Well, we're going back and forth until I realized, no, she's quite serious, and she thinks I'm literally trying to kind of cheat my daughter. And my daughter was really offended, and I was really heartbroken. And I left absolutely crying. And I could not, for the life of me, understand how my own mother, who was a good woman, could think that I was doing that. What she said to me the next day was simply, I still just can't understand how you can rattle off and completely love and know everything about Elizabethan times and Tudor history and not get the strategy of the corner on the Monopoly board. It's that perpetual dichotomy, disconnect, that makes the world think that we are mean or cruel or arrogant, rude, when what we're trying desperately to be is lovable. And it's really, really, really hard when even those who know you can't see it in the moment because you stop seeing it yourself.
Hard person to follow, by the way. I was thinking very much the same thing. And in fact, there are two quotes that come to my mind in similar relationship. Winston Churchill and Aristotle said, he who does not learn from history is doomed to repeat it. Unfortunately, we are doomed souls. We repeat it over and over again. Mine is social justice. I just cannot cotton to somebody pushing the little guy down. Part of it is having been the little guy, you know, and learning to be so bloody fierce that it becomes the intimidator. And then you know that becomes part of the problem too at the same time because you become the social reject. All because you just can't take the bullying. You can't take the little guy getting hurt so much. It doesn't go away. You know, that was the challenge as a child, and that's a challenge as an adult. And that's why I do this, and that's why I do environmental work. And that's why when I hear colleagues say completely idiotic things about people who have challenges, I go ballistic. I can't keep my mouth shut. Yes, universities are full of socially inappropriate people who are way too smart. So then we have to agree to disagree. And sometimes I think we can't even do that. I think I segued, but all right.
And that's why Tony Atwoods refers to universities as sheltered workshops for people with Asperger's syndrome. For me, the challenges, I've had many of the same challenges that Jennifer and Chris have described. Twice exceptional. How can you be so good at this, but be so dumb at that? And sometimes a variation. How can you be so bad at this, or so stupid at this, and be so good at that? And social interaction, reading nonverbal cues, that's always been a challenge. In grade school, it was met with bullying. Every now and then, I meet a person on the spectrum who hasn't been bullied.
I said, wow.
Yeah, it happens.
Is that possible?
Yeah.
Well, the person who I know who hasn't been bullied, grand total of one, had an advantage that most of us didn't have, and that was his father was the principal of the school. So getting along with my classmates in a way that they could understand and interact with, I guess saying the letter B over and over again in grade school really didn't help with social interaction. Fast forwarding to the adult world, bullying still existed in the workplace. It does for a lot of us on the spectrum. It does for a lot of people in general. And even to this point, what I found the best way to maintain employment is, as Chris mentioned more than once, find someone who believes in you. And they don't necessarily have to know that you're on the autism spectrum, but somehow they sense there's a difference. And there's a lot of ability within that difference. And what I do now is, now that I know more about myself, as we're all learning about ourselves and how to work with what we have, as opposed to perseverating on what we don't have. So using the abilities-based model, what can we do? Because I have such a hard time remembering my students' faces, in class, it takes me a whole semester before I begin to recognize my students. I just tell them flat out, if it looks like I don't recognize you in class or outside of class, it means that I don't. And information is power, and I tell them why I don't recognize this information. I have people at the university I can go to and ask some of what may seem to be the most ridiculous and stupid questions that how can anybody ask such a thing? It's so simple. But at the same time, there are patterns that I recognize that other people don't, and even trying to discuss them, people wonder what I'm talking about. So it's really a matter of networking with others, asking people for advice, asking other Aspies for advice, and asking friendly people who aren't on the autism spectrum, who strive to understand us, for advice as well. So I think that's the best way to, for me, to overcome these challenges. You're on.
Terrific. See, am I on? Yeah, okay.
Hold it close.
Okay, all right. It's a very sensitive mic, I guess. I was a radio guy for a while, so I'm still terrified of getting too close because I'll pop my peas. I'm going to, I would say that the biggest things that I fight, and maybe in some perfect world where we all accepted people with all their differences, this would not happen, but I doubt it. I fight anxiety. I fight terror. I fight depression. I fight the strangeness that I feel in myself with people who aren't really, really close to me. And by the way, they're not necessarily going to be people on the autistic spectrum. If you get somebody who's really, really interested in movies and you put them in the room with somebody who's really, really interested in cars, you're probably going to get two monologues. But I guess my biggest challenge is still holding it together. It's just a really tough situation. And I think that these are recurrent themes with autistic people. There's this wonderful program that they use in the gay community called It Gets Better. My words, and in a weird way, they are comforting to me, is it doesn't get better. But you learn how to live with it. And you learn how, again, the protective coloring or involving yourself in something that really, really matters to you. And that way you can be just as, out of it as you want to be. You also eventually find friends. And maybe if you're very lucky, a wife or a lover or something, but it's tough, and it doesn't get that much better. However, once you've been around a scary corner a lot of times, and you've learned how to behave, and you make a deal with yourself, I can go through this because it's only an hour or something like that, rather than just an open-ended thing, you do start to know what the world is like, and you do manage to find whatever, as John Lennon used to say, gets you through the night.
What was the question again?
There we go. The question is, what are some of your biggest challenges that you face today?
Well, trying to think here. Some of my in school, academic classes are a challenge because it's like when I'm fully present, I and trying to listen to what the teacher's saying. It's like I find it interesting in the moment, but then then all of a sudden I can't remember the information. And I also struggle with OCD and tics and what else? And anxiety, for instance, around trying to think here. Let me think. Oh, like for instance, I have sensitive hearing, which makes me fearful around sudden loud noises like fire alarms, for instance. And so, yeah.
What? Sure. Thank you, Benjamin.
I'm saying this a little bit for Benjamin's benefit, but mostly for yours. What he keeps doing that's so good is that he says, hold on one moment, let me think. A speaker's trick. The most awful sound that a public speaker can make is right? You're taught simply shut your mouth. What Benjamin's doing in real time is essentially giving you very clear indication that, hold on, I'm still with you. I want to think about it for a moment. And then he's coming back. He's self-advocating in real time right now. And yeah. And I think it's those moments that we need to point out when they're happening, because it's really easy as the person who's doing them to feel, and forgive me if I'm misassigning any feelings, Benjamin, but to feel like, oh, dang, wait, what was I doing? I'm messing up here. And he couldn't be more off if that's the feeling, because he's like nailing it by saying, hold on one moment, I need to think. How much better would we all be if everybody just kind of said that, right?
Thanks, Jennifer. I tell my daughter it's not a race, so I wanted to give you time. So you can take all the time you want to think. You can take time to think. It's okay.
I do have another thing I forgot to clarify.
Go ahead.
Well, something rather interesting. As you probably noticed, I have a tendency to glitch as I speak or things like that, but when it's never seems to be an issue like when I'm singing, because it's a totally different part of the brain involved. And yeah.
Thanks, Benjamin. So I want to read what Samir has written around challenges in his life. Yes, I'm going to read it. Okay. Home life, so difficult, moment by moment, I manipulate reason. How can I describe sensory tumult? Thousands of sights and sounds bombard me continually. During the day, I hide my mind like an ostrich hides his head in the sand. During night, recreate designs of theory of light universe. In my minute experience, its essence only is understood by working the jigsaw puzzle. Dad and Mom always related to autism as behavior, but each time motor response fails. Now my parents get it now, keep me centered. Don't parents hide in their assumptions as children? My lonely life talks for itself. People designate autistic features like energy and stems as signs of mental retardation. Determined behaviorist methods teach autistics to talk, but my Wernicke's Broca connection is broken. I am nonverbal. I am always having to prove my IQ. I never give in to pressure. Mom says my intelligence shows through my scientific inquiry. I refuse to be silent. My words are my weapon. Reality is minute by minute. Life evolves. Hate and discrimination and fear of what man cannot tangibly understand. Autism generates horrible reactions from society. By seclusion, by management, by treatments, society determines our value, our masters, our path in life. But we will persevere onward and direct our own destiny. I am arranging potentials in my neural network by absorbing my knowledge through my environment. The stems I have will book my understanding and take me through life. Make use of talent, no matter how obscure. Be proud to be autistic. Thank you all for listening. Okay. I don't know if that is so moving to me. 40% of our population doesn't talk, and Samir, thank you.
Samir, before you leave, Samir, I am a small shadow of a man in comparison to you. You were amazing. Speak for all of us.
I am so proud to share the spectrum with you. So thank you for being my brother.
Come on.
Say thank you. Thank you.
Do you need time?
Many times. Thank you. T H A
N K
thank
Y O U. Thank you.
F
F O R 4 U
U N D E R S T
A.
N B I N for understanding.
Thank you for understanding. Sorry, that's really moving. Okay. If each of you could relate, maybe some of the challenges in your childhood with your parents. There's been different levels of understanding around autism through the time my daughter's been diagnosed. I mean, my understanding's evolved. What would you want parents today to understand better? Go ahead, Stephen.
Got to figure out how to get it on first. All right, there we go. It all starts with the parents. Parents are the experts on their children. Now, I was fortunate to have parents who refuted the professionals' recommendations for institutionalization and somehow intuitively reached out into my world, and then they were able to bring me out into theirs. These days, we have so many more resources for parents. These days, we have organizations such as this one, USAAA. We have others. We have parent groups. We have the internet. It's so much easier for us to communicate and to share our challenges, to share our successes. And for parents, I think what is most important is to determine what your child's strengths are and find ways to expand on them. Of course, the challenges are there. If there weren't challenges to having autism, we wouldn't be here trying to figure it out. And we do have to work with them. We have to remediate for them. But at the same time, we must keep in mind what those strengths are. And by engaging in those strengths, those of us on the spectrum can flourish. And as a matter of fact, that's the only way we can flourish. And I also suspect that it's the same for everybody else as well, whether you have autism or not. Thank you.
I guess it got handed to me. I don't know that I can answer the question about my parents except on one part, because I wasn't diagnosed as a child. I was that weird kid. I had really terrible allergies. Like, I was allergic to everything. Open the door, I'm allergic to it. Close the door, I'm allergic to it. And it's like, oh, my poor mother, what she went through. I would go to school with the craziest lunches, lobster and crab in my lunchbox. You know? All the kids are like, what's that? It's not peanut butter and jelly, sorry. You know, couldn't drink milk. Oh, and I would scam every kid out of a Twinkie from my container of milk. Though, lo and behold, I couldn't drink the darn stuff, so I would have thrown it away, you know. You know, and I had horrible asthma and, you know, just could hardly breathe anywhere I went. But my mom was one of the first major biomed moms. You know, she was part of the allergy movement here in Kansas City in 1970. And that was, I mean, she was a wacko, right? I still love the smell of a health food store. I just walk in and it feels like home and I want to cry every time, you know, because that was safe. But what I can talk about is as a parent, because I have two children and both of them are on the spectrum. And Stephen's right. We do know them, but they also teach us about them. You know, I have learned to not assume in the same way that I always ask my parents, never assume you know who I am or how I will turn out. I explain teaching art the same way. You have an idea about what you're going to make, and suddenly your art takes off in a whole new direction, and you've got to ride this wild horse. Well, that's what it is to raise a child. But it's even wilder, too, when you're raising a kid on the spectrum. You know, it could flip on you in a dime, and so, you know, you just kind of have to learn to relax and go with the flow and pay attention to what they're really, really interested in, what they're really, really good at. And don't forget to challenge the areas of deficiency, because they still have to interact in the rest of the world. If my parents had not grilled into me the idea of put yourself in someone else's shoes before you open your mouth, and I mean it was beat into me, I would be flapping my mouth off like crazy half the time, and people would think I was a nut job. So you have to keep that going. Encourage, redirect, and do that with both the positive and the challenges.
I just want to make something clear because I'm following Jennifer's advice. You don't all have to answer the question. It's if you want. So go ahead.
Thank you. Similarly to Chris, I'm quite sure my father had Asperger's. He passed away 7 years ago. And so oddly, I learned from what he didn't have. I saw him struggle, and when I would cry that I was writing to Santa and asking in my letter for friends for Christmas, he would turn around and leave the room. And it wasn't until I became an adult and really received my own diagnosis and began to understand what that meant, I could see he wasn't being cold. He felt that so viscerally that he had to leave. And so being in this sort of sandwich position between him and my own children, I think I would offer you this request on behalf of all of us. Choose kindness always. It's that simple. Whether it's a meltdown, whether it's the best day, we're always dealing with anxiety, always, about something. And when you're scared, yelling at somebody for being scared or shaming them, making fun, shame is the fear that if you... Shame is the fear that if you reveal your authentic self, you lose whatever connection you have. We're all afraid, and that includes all of the kids, that we are unlovable, and when you think you're unlovable, you'll love for crumbs. So please just choose kindness when you don't feel like it, because I know what that feels like. I know when the days are, I might have accidentally poured coffee over my own head sometime, but, while my kids are freaking out, I get that. I get bad days as a parent, too, of kids on the spectrum, too, when all you want to do is hide. And that's when you got to dig deep. And know that in loving them and choosing kindness for them, truthfully, at the end of that day, you will also have loved yourself better, and you will be so very pleased with who you were in that moment. So I think that's what it mostly comes down to. Just choose kindness.
I guess I'm going to give slightly paradoxical theoretical advice to parents out there. I don't think I would have made it as far as I did without the profound kindness of my mother and her huge support for me, no matter what awful stuff I was doing at the time, which was sometimes pretty awful. So that kind of support, that kind of love is terrific. It's also really good to give a kid some kind of intellectual stimulation. On the other hand, my other advice would be, especially in this time where people just don't, I mean, in a lot of places, people don't just go down the block and play with the neighborhood kids, but you have things like play dates and these kind of monstrosities which are going on now, you know. As much as you can, stay out of the kid's face. While providing the love, while providing the support. My dad was convinced that I had a terrific mathematical brain and that I would be great at math and great at science. As such, I've despised them pretty much all my life. On the other hand, he took me to Ingmar Bergman films. He took me to Wild Strawberries when I was 7. And, you know, that absolutely changed my life. A lot of Aspie kids don't want, you know, we don't really get the enthusiasm that people put into, to mention a few of my own phobias when I was a kid, like class productions, circuses, church, a lot of things like that, which meant a lot to my brother and sister, and they were very much interested in them. And, you know, again, to go back to Ferdinand, I just wanted to sit there and smell the flowers and not be part of anything big and public. You know, above all, I hated sort of inauthenticity. I mean, I think I was a little existentialist from when I was born. And when people would try to get me really excited about something which I was not excited about, my reaction then, and I'm afraid to some extent my reaction now, was just to flee and get back out there with the world that I understood and the people that I loved. And as difficult as it was for me to make friends, I learned how to do it. And as such, I still nurture these friends. I have friends who I've had for 50, 55 years now. And, you know, they're just a part of my everyday life. You know, so somebody will get you. Absolutely give the support that you can. But then after that, kind of leave them alone and get them to deal with, you know, let them deal with what is, at least in my experience, a very challenging world.
Sure, go ahead, Chris.
Jennifer hit a really good note. It's interesting, a talk, and things go right out of my head halfway towards the end. Really, one thing I want to say is, dads, give yourself a whole heck of a lot of grace. We are not set up. We are not taught. We are not trained. Our culture is not designed to set us up to do this well. We're supposed to be the bravado heroes. We're supposed to whip our kids into shape, right? The tough guys, right? How many of you have, you know, cops as dads? I do. How many of you have been in the military or had military dads? I mean, that list gets pretty big, and then it gets more severe. Give yourself a whole heck of a lot of grace, and moms, give them a little bit of grace. The pressure they have as a parent is radically different than the pressure you have. Oh, they get to escape the house, right? The house is in their head. They don't get to escape the house. They have to make sure that everything is taken care of so you can do the job you do, and the kids can have the safety and protection that they have. And man, they come home and it's screaming at them after a day of awfulness at work.
A lot of moms do that too.
Oh yeah, a lot of moms do it too. And they pop. And then they're ashamed. And I'm speaking from my own experience. The work you see behind you literally came out of one of those moments where I realized I was not being the best parent I ever wanted to be. Give yourself a whole lot of grace.
Thanks, Chris. Benjamin, I wanted to give you a chance to talk if you had something to add. Is there a piece of advice that you would give parents, what you want them to know about autism? Did you want to add?
Sure. So, people with autism need nurturing and much time spent with enthusiastic people. And one thing I would highly recommend for people with autism who are lovers of music is for them to join a choir, because one way that my soul and spirit have really been one thing that has really nourished my soul and spirit. Back home, I'm in my high school's festival choir. Fairview High School has the most amazing choir program ever, and we sing we sing complex classical works. In fact, last spring we sang movements from Carmina Burana with Fairview Orchestra and Band, and yeah, it just makes me feel so good inside. And another amazing thing, I am in a musical theater camp called Tapestry. It's a summer camp, and it's for people who are different to be included in the experience of musical theater. And each lead is paired with a neurotypical mentor or understudy. And we meet like twice to 3 times per week, and it happens throughout for 3.5 months. And then the performance is a high quality and just so amazing, and it even moves the audience to tears. And this summer, next week, we're putting on the musical Bye Bye Birdie, and I'm playing the male lead, Albert. So.
Thanks, Benjamin. I'm wondering if, for maybe those of you who've held jobs, Benjamin, I don't know if you've had a part-time job, but chime in if you have. What tips would you give your fellow folks? Okay, great. What tips would you give your fellow brothers and sisters on the spectrum in terms of success? You know, what is it they need to know to be more successful in getting employed? Benjamin, would you like to start this one?
Yes, please. Well, I think last summer and the summer before that, I've been working for this youth project in Boulder called Cultiva, and it's a gardening project where we do a lot of weeding and organic crop harvesting, and we sell them to the community-supported agriculture. And we work twice per week for 5 hours a work day. I mean, it was hard work, but definitely suited to me. And so in order for, there are different organizations for people with special needs to find a job. Like for instance, one of the organizations in Boulder is called Community Link. And so if you're ever interested, you might consider seeing their website. Also, this year I'm taking urban agriculture and greenhouse management at a tech center, which is part of Boulder Valley School District, where where the teacher gives us the skills and prepares us for the real world. Because I would like to hopefully get a job in a greenhouse once I'm all done with high school. I'm a super senior, so I get to take more exotic classes, and so yeah. And at the Tech Center, there are other things, classes offered like forensics, automotive collision repair, and culinary arts and restaurant management, you know. So.
Thanks, Benjamin. I just wanted to tag on to what Benjamin said because he goes to the same school that my daughter Rachel did. Do you remember meeting Rachel? Rachel Ringham?
I don't think.
Maybe not. Rachel went to that school, and I just wanted to say for all you parents, look in your school districts for a career technical center. That school that Benjamin's talking about gives you college credit. My daughter got free college credit into her community college. It does set you up for success, and they do teach interview skills, and they have contests. And you can, and you're interviewed by real live employers. And that's what Benjamin's talking about. And so I'm really grateful he brought that up. There are resources in your school to do that.
I'm going to take off a little on this. One of my first heroes was the mathematician Archimedes. And there's a famous story. I don't know whether it's true or not. I mean, it's very hard to, tell. But the story is that soldiers came in and they were threatening to kill him. And he was working on one of his projects. And instead of even caring about his life, he said, "Do not disturb my circles." And I would say that the best kind of job that you can hope to find is someplace that will let you do what you're interested in, that will not disturb your circles, that will let you work on the things that you really care a great deal about, and we'll kind of leave you alone. We'll understand if you don't necessarily want to go to lots of meetings, a lot of parties. We'll understand your need to be alone. We'll understand that, I don't know about the rest of the people on the panel, but I can't think of anything much more terrifying than overstimulation. I mean, even at my age, if you put me behind a counter at a drugstore, I'd have a meltdown within an hour. I mean, I just can't deal with that many different faces, that many different needs. So being an administrator in an orchestra was very tough for me. I'm much happier now that I can be a squirrely little professor and go into my office and hide there until my class. And I get along very well with my students, and then just go off and do my own thing. So I think that for most of you will be something like that will be the way your children or you will be happiest.
Anything to add?
Yeah, sure. Just like with anybody else, find your strengths, because that's where you'll be happy. Find your strengths. Look for your characteristics. What are your abilities? What are your interests? And everybody, whether they have Asperger's syndrome or not, if you're working in an area that you're good at, if you're working in an area of strength that matches your personality, whatever it might be, whether it's a squirrely little professor, as you say, and some of us do like to interact with people, but how we interact with people, such as a professor, that's very important to understand. And the same goes with everybody else. So why are we talking about people on the autism spectrum? Because there is a difference, and that has to do with intensity. There's stuff we're good at, we're incredibly good at. The stuff we're not good at, well, how can you be so dumb and so smart at the same time? And workplaces tend to not tolerate that type of stuff. Unfortunately. So we need greater awareness in the workplace as well. The biggest challenge that I see in finding employment for those of us on the spectrum has to do with the gatekeeper interview. One of the most social things anybody can do is to undergo a job interview. Talk about hidden curriculum, unwritten rules. What do you do when the interviewer says, well, I'm going to go find a few things in my file, and why don't you have a seat while I pull these things out? Well, no. The interviewer has to sit down first. That's the rule. I'm not going to sit down until you sit down. We tend to be rule-based. So the portfolio method, whenever possible, I find is the best way. Portfolio method, people who know you, people who can get you an in. I was using the portfolio method as a teenager when I realized that bicycle repair was my forte, and bicycle repair is where I needed to be, not working in busy, noisy restaurants where I'd have meltdowns. And that just didn't work. And I'd go from shop to shop on my custom-made bicycle that I built from the spokes and ball bearings up, find the manager, nerd into my bicycle with the manager, and then eventually ask him for a job. Well, what about all those hidden curriculum rules about making eye contact with the interviewer, shaking their hand, and having small talk conversation before you get started? Well, all of that's gone because we're focused on the bicycle. We're focused on the object of work as opposed to all the small talk beforehand. And then when it came time for me to ask for a job, he already knew that I knew my way around bicycles. So the portfolio method, having people who know you, who can get you through the proverbial back door, even my university job, I came through that way, where a woman that I barely recognized, as I said, I don't recognize anybody, just comes to me and says, we have an opening in our department. I think it'd fit. Here's my email address. Email me. And that got me into the university job. Of course, I had to do the interview, but by the time the interview came, they had done their research, and there was none of this fancy toe tapping, which is another area of discussion, of disclosure, and why they might want to hire a person with autism as opposed to somebody who doesn't have autism to teach courses on autism. We could get into the nitty-gritty of being a professor and my teaching ability. Thanks.
Thanks, Stephen. We are at 11:20, and I never understand where the time goes. What I would really like, if you two want to comment, I think the employment thing is so valuable. If you could be really succinct, because what I'd like to do is then go into the one thing you want to leave everybody with, and I'm going to give you enough time to do that.
So I've had the non-traditional career. I've been mostly self-employed as a commercial photographer, a filmmaker, web developer, that high-energy guy. And only for the last 10 years have I been a professor, the squirrely professor. So that's an extremely different paradigm shift where I have to be social. I have to go to those meetings and do the parties, and it's like I stay there 5 minutes. I know. But I get to be the squirrely professor, that kind of weird guy. But the key is find people who believe in you. The folks who really taught me everything weren't the education people. They were the people out there in the industry. The people like Walter Gray, who was a food photographer in Chicago, or Josh Dreyfus, who was a children's fashion photographer. I mean, these are people who I learned everything by, who believed in me deeply and passionately. A guy named Jim Cudney, who runs a company named Techno Tribe Communications, web development. He gave me my first job as a producer-director when he had a different company. And they would forgive me for my foibles because my strengths in this arena are so incredibly strong. And so they could handle all of that stuff. Now, they often wouldn't let me talk to clients, but that's okay, And the other part of it is recognize where your deficiencies are. If you don't have to be a professor. You do not have to be a teacher. You can be self-employed. I'm a terrible businessman. I can't do the numbers, but I got a brilliant wife who understands how to handle that stuff. Find that support network that will help you take care of you.
Absolutely. All right, I'm going to try to do 1, 2, 3. This is first. It's actually so it's to the parents and teachers. one of the best things, or what we're taught, is that we're supposed to encourage our children to discover themselves along the way, and the world is open and all these possibilities, and that is true. And also, you put an autistic kid or a kid on the spectrum in a room with lots of really great toys to explore, and what do? Either nothing, or they go to the same toy because they know what to do with it, right? So lots of choices, that's a wonderful thing, and it totally paralyzes us. So that means you need to help direct us. That's not your choosing our career, but it is helping to direct us and give us a specific, help us to develop a specific trajectory for our own lives. Too many open-ended questions and possibilities is, well, just too many. Second thing is to those on the spectrum, yes, self-advocate, it does. It means speak up for yourself, and that's okay, but that doesn't mean demand and stomp your feet and, be argumentative and difficult. What it simply means is be clear and succinct and say, all right, here's all the things I'm going to offer you, portfolio, show it, and then say, here, before a problem happens, and by the way, if there's ever a time that I say or do something that seems abrupt or short or rude or off-putting or just that you don't quite get, please do me the favor of asking me, because I can promise you I didn't mean it. And I'd love to know about that, and so I can do it differently at a different time. Right there, you're showing humility, you're showing the interest that you would rather learn and grow than be right, and you're putting it out there so that if it does happen, you've kind of got that insurance ahead of time. I've done that. That has made a huge difference. When I didn't do it, I didn't know to do it. Bad stuff. And so for the sake of time, just remember this. A candle does not lose any of its light by lighting another, which means that in whatever you're doing, don't feel compelled to constantly be the one who's receiving everyone's focus. Generally, we're criticized because it seems like we want everyone's attention. We want all the attention all the time. No, what that is us saying we need affirmation because we get lots of negative feedback. We need the volume turned up, perhaps on the positive too. But that does mean remembering for us that the others, it's okay to let other people be wonderful at what they do. That doesn't make you any less wonderful at what you do.
Great advice. Okay, we're in the lightning round. You get a minute. I'm going to leave you. Oh, I'm sorry, Benjamin.
Yeah. So anyway, an important thing, one thing that has helped me in life is using mottos. And one of my favorite mottos, first of all, I'm trying to think here. A good motto in life is dare to try or dare to fail, because instead of just sitting around doing nothing, it's important that you achieve what you want to achieve, and I mean trying to pursue something huge in your life, if you fail, could involve a lot of despair, and yeah, that's just life. So yeah.
Thank you, Benjamin. I think you just answered the question I was going to ask, which is if there's one thing you wanted to leave the audience with, and that was so perfect. Thank you. Samir also had something he wanted to share, and then I'm going to turn it back over to our panel. He said, we, referring to the nonverbal individuals with autism, are prayer in its purest form. So he leaves you with that. Tim, maybe you could pick it up. What will you leave us with today?
Oh gosh, you would ask me this one.
I'm asking everybody.
I guess I just wish you all luck and hope that you find something that really means something to you, because that's wonderful. I mean, I sometimes think there's a little too much emphasis placed on on just that everybody will be incredibly happy and find something. And I've found that a lot of my autistic friends who've not found things have had a much more difficult life than I do. So I just wish that you all find something that you can entirely pour yourself into, and that will keep you afloat.
Thanks. Stephen?
Know yourself. Help the person on the spectrum know their strengths, know their challenges, know their characteristics, and again, looking at it from an abilities-based model. What can we do? And again, keeping in mind that there are challenges to having autism, or we wouldn't be here trying to figure it out. But just like with everybody else, we will be most successful by using our strengths.
I'm going to leave you with one of my favorite quotes from Shakespeare. It comes out of Hamlet, and it is not "Alas, poor Yorick." It's just after that. Emperor Caesar, dead and turned to clay, the stop to hold to keep the wind away. Oh, that that man that kept the world in awe should stop the winter's flaw. For me, and people like me, I find beauty in the darkest of places. Places that are like Mars, arid and wonderful, where water once existed and dreams can happen in my head. Why I think Io is the most amazing potential where humanity can go, believe and dream. And if that dream takes you down the journey of a career in film or photography or music or physics or engineering or just whatever is not been imagined yet of human beings doing, dream and believe and find beauty in the ways that you find beauty.
Thanks.
Taught my daughter when she was a very little girl and in the hospital quite a lot that being brave means feeling afraid but doing it anyway. When I close my eyes at the end of my days, I want to slide into home plate going, dang, that was fun. So, be brave. Feel afraid and do it anyway. Ask, why not? Try it. Believe in the possible. Know that this life is about wonder and chance and love and the brightest sunshine and the darkest night. Live every day. Believe that you were meant to be exactly who you are, where you are, how you are right now. Because there will never be another you in this moment. And I personally am desperately glad that you happened.
Let's give them all a really big round of applause, please.